Welcome to Growing Pains, a podcast of the Sumner County Republican Freedom Caucus. I'm your host, Deanne Dewitt. Today's guest is a person who knows more about how growth tests a community's patience and potential. Gallatin Mayor Paige Brown, thank you for being here.
Definitely test our patience, but it does bring opportunity for potential.
It does.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Well, let me make sure viewers that I think most know a little bit about your extensive resume, but there's certain things that you've been doing recently that I don't know if everyone really has tuned into. So, quick summary: elected in 2014, you're currently in your third term, serving as mayor of nicest place in America. It once was.
In 2017. I don't know about now.
I don't know, but there are a lot of things that still sound true about that. You were executive director of our Chamber of Commerce. You graduated from Florida State and worked as both a reporter and
anchor, executive producer. I did all the stuff in TV until I could not take another day.
Is that what led you away into public service?
New career. Well, journalism certainly changed, right?
Right, it has. And, we won't go down that rabbit hole, but man, I just heard of another couple of anchors that are leaving a major channel locally. So something to be said for that. Here's the ones that I want to make sure I get right. President of the Tennessee Municipal League.
I was
right? Past president, right? Okay, vice chair of the Regional Transit Authority, still vice chair.
Yes.
On the executive committee of Middle Tennessee Mayor's Caucus.
Yes, ma'am.
Past president of Greater Nashville Regional Council.
Yes, and you need to let me explain what that is exactly.
Yeah, let's do that. There is a lot of ground to cover here, but that is an important one. I'm just going to mention this other little tidbit. In 2021, you were recognized and awarded Mayor of the Year by the Tennessee Municipal League. And certainly that came on the heels of one of the defining moments of your service as mayor after COVID and all the other things that were going on at that time. So there is a lot there to cover. I already mentioned GNRC. So let's talk about how Gallatin fits in this greater municipal region of Nashville and what GNRC is.
I just want to be clear because a lot of people think that Nashville, the GNRC is some part of metro government, and it's absolutely not. It's one of 9 development districts across the state of Tennessee, and the cities and counties are placed in those development districts. And through those development districts, we get a lot of our funding. Things like Meals on Wheels happen, a lot of senior programs, plus planning assistance, all kinds of really high-level technical experience that cities the size of ours, and certainly smaller, couldn't afford on their own. So it has nothing to do with metro government. And there is no dictation of some, world dominion. No
takeover plan to turn us all into a Nashville.
Yeah, absolutely not. No. I don't think anyone here wants to be Nashville, nor do we have the space or the politics or that's not what people are here for.
No, I've had some firsthand experience working with GNRC and their planning teams, and they helped actually in the early stages of the Comer Barn project, which we don't need to talk about, but it is one of those fun things that has happened in Gallatin finally, and GNRC was part of that as well, and trying to cast a vision for how we get there. So I know that they've done a lot of good in our city. Recently, it was maybe a few weeks ago now, by the time we air this episode, you delivered the State of the City, the annual State of the City address. It always leaves me in happy tears.
Well, thank you.
You have a lot of you care deeply about this community and about this city, and that shines through every chance.
I appreciate that you say that. There are certainly those that think that I have some nefarious goal for what I'm doing, but really it's born of love and care for the community that my ancestors for generations built. And last thing I want to do is be disrespectful to their memories or for what they've done here. I love doing the State of the City. This year I was very nervous about it because it has been a tough year. But I rewrite up to the last minute. I'm literally making changes with the person that's running the teleprompter because I want things to say and go a certain way. And I delivered it okay. I don't think it was my best delivery ever, but it really was from the heart. I mean, I tried to be very informative, but I tried to give people perspective and things to think about. and be real honest. And that's kind of hard because you have to be vulnerable sometimes to be that way.
There's so many highlights when you look back just over the course of a year. There are a lot of projects. There's a lot of things happening, and there's a lot to celebrate. But you approached this one with a different edge of both awareness of all that, but a sense of urgency that standing still is not an option. So here we are faced with some serious challenges. So I know that you are the perfect person to join us on this episode or on this podcast talking about growing pains. Gallatin's seen a lot of it. So.
They have, and standing still is not an option. And to me, one of the most fascinating things, I was talking to a gentleman in the parking lot of the Food Line last weekend. He had no idea I was the mayor of Gallatin. He's lived here since the 80s, and which is interesting in and of itself, right? But he loves it here. But when I said, well, there's a lot of people who are really mad about all the growth, he's like, I deliver lumber all over the Middle Tennessee region. It's happening everywhere. And the reality is there is a mass exodus from other states to reach the goal that is now Tennessee. It's because of our cost of living. It's certainly because of our tax advantages. And I think COVID accelerated that. And it's created kind of this stack of problems that we could not have anticipated. And so we're all doing the best that we can. As at the same time, we're trying to bring quality investment to our community. I know people have this idea that if you stop building new housing, nobody else can move here. But the reality of that is my fear, because the reality of that is that our workforce, people that work for our city, that work for our schools, will be forced further and further and further out for somewhere to live until it's closer for them to work in Cookeville, or closer for them to work in Bowling Green, or closer for them to work in, I don't know, over in Wilson County, although Wilson County is experiencing the exact same thing we are. Last night I saw a report on the news and I was like, oh, brother, it's the last thing I wanted to hear. But the projection is that Metro is not just projected to be 20,000 housing units short of the demand in 2040. They're projected to be 20,000 lots short. So they're talking about, how do we make density happen? And I know that a lot of people look at what's going on in all the cities around Middle Tennessee, and not necessarily everyone wants to live in a community where there's someone really close to you. I don't. Right. But some people really like that. I can remember, I don't think he'd mind me telling the story, but I can remember when Chief Beeman came to Gallatin from the Memphis area, and he was talking about looking for a home. And I said, well, what do you want? He says, I want something big enough that we're comfortable in, but not big enough that my boys are comfortable moving back into. And I want no yard. And so he was able to find that in the community here in Gallatin. He did not want a yard. And there are a lot of people that feel that way. Now, I think a lot of people that are coming to our community from other states, they may have lived more in a city and they're used to being in apartments, and they're used to, and they think the idea of a yard or even a small farm is really, really attractive. It will be interesting to see how that plays out over time. Right. Because, once the lawnmower breaks and, the septic system fails and all the things that happen in those scenarios, you start thinking differently. At the same time, you're also aging, and there's a reality as to what you can do. I know one of the funniest things I ever saw on, I don't know, probably Nextdoor or something, it was a lady that had moved here from California, and she was living maybe in Castaigne Springs, and she had bought 5 or 10 acres. And she said that she needed somebody to come spray her land for critters. I don't know if that meant bugs or animals or what. And that she also needed to hire somebody to do something called bush hawking, bushhocking. So she bought this land likely because it was her dream. And of course, by now she may be like the best cottage farmer in Sumner County. And I wish that for her. But I think
the reality
what
is
we have here is very attractive, but the reality of living in different circumstances is sometimes harder than you think. I've talked a lot. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I think there's a lot of things that most can relate to at one point or another. And your story about Chief Beeman, I could see evolving to that stage of life where I just don't want a yard or a pool or any of the hassles that come with any of it. And I do have friends that are retirement age who have chosen that lifestyle, and I do envy the free time they have. So, I know maybe it was during the State of the City or just other conversations, you have talked about sort of, it's not a choice of having the Gallatin of years gone by or the Gallatin of the future. There's this tension of how do you preserve what's special while adapting to these changes. And I think there's a lot of interesting lessons, just even in the time that you've served as mayor, of how the city has evolved.
In the time that I've served, again, I hope you won't mind me telling the story, but I was talking to my brother on the phone the other day, and he was doing his job, and he was driving, and I heard him honk at somebody. And I said, Philip, what are you doing? He's like, oh, man, he said, well, they were going slow. I'm like, we don't do that. And so when I say that, it's just kind of an example of something about how our culture has changed. And so I think one of the things that is most appealing about the South, Tennessee, certainly Gallatin, is our spirit of being neighborly and kind and open and friendly.
Yeah.
And I fear that if people that continue to move here that don't feel a responsibility to perpetuate that we lose that. And that not only, wipes out our welcoming culture, it kind of changes the whole South. And I hear all the time people will say, we just moved here because people are so nice. And said, okay, now you have a responsibility. Help us keep it that way. And honoring the history and preserving the things that we can. And again, I see where people have just a misunderstanding of what the government's limitations are. I mean, you talk about conservative values. For me, it's property rights, small government, capitalism.
Absolutely.
The things that are really, foundational to the decisions that we make. And I see more and more that there's an expectation that the government control everything you don't like, but not control anything you do like. And you can't have it both ways, right? And
Indeed.
so trying to keep that perspective of, and really educate people, no, that's not the government's responsibility. A lot of times you have civil issues that they want the government to solve. And they often, I have so many times gotten calls from people wanting to know why we don't have this here, why we don't have this here, why we don't have this here. And I say, well, why'd you move here? Oh, because it's so cheap. The taxes are so low. Correlation. We could do those things, but your taxes are going to go up. And talking about taxes and cost of living, I mean, the shortage of housing certainly has escalated the prices and the high demand. But trying to keep taxes low, trying to keep your utility costs low, that is what we can continue to do. And to do that, you have to attract the things that offset the cost of services to your citizens, right, which is things like large capital investment. And that's what we have in Gallatin in the industrial park. When you look at the money generated in Sumner County, it's interesting to see where a lot of the dollars come from. Obviously, they're going to come from your property taxes. They're going to come from your sales tax, but they're also going to come from personal property by these big industries that have
right,
a lot of money invested in their personal capital, their personal investment, and it's very valuable to us. We talk a lot about attracting large capital investment, small demand for employees, and that is because pre-COVID, there was a projection that the baby boomers would be retiring and that we would have a workforce shortage, not just here, but across the country. Right. And maybe AI takes up some of that slack, but there's still going to be the need for people. And so then COVID happened. A lot of those baby boomers exited the workplace earlier. And then the whole, work remote thing came to be. And so it's really changed our workforce. And to get back to what I was saying, we don't want new jobs to come to Gallatin and take away workers from other companies. So we continue to try and escalate the skills, the investment, and what they have to offer for citizens in hopes that they'll be able to hire people who are maybe working elsewhere and want to work closer to home.
Right.
I mentioned the whole remote workforce, and that has been a dynamic. I really think I've had the conversation with some of our representatives. It's something that Tennessee needs to acknowledge and understand, because we have remote workers coming from other states to live here, because if they don't live in their state, they don't have to pay their state's income tax. So they're living here, they're using our housing inventory. It's really good. It's really, really good for our economy because they typically have money to spend. But the whole housing challenge creates a difficulty, and they don't contribute to our workforce. So trying to figure out how the world has changed is interesting, at the same time that you're trying to navigate, yet be nimble, yet be smart, yet watch your dollars, all the things.
Governing is really tough. There are no easy answers for any of these things. And I think that's one of the observations when people kind of go on attack of all the things that they want to complain about in government. There's just a very simple-minded understanding of what it takes, that it's just black and white, yes or no. And really it's problem solving, and it's finding a way to navigate through all those complexities you just talked about.
Right. When people say, why are we getting another bank? Hendersonville's, why are we getting another chicken place? Gallatin, it's like, why are we getting another car wash or check cashing place? I agree. We don't need any more of those. Well, maybe the banks, but all the things that people bring to your community. And somehow I think they think that, like, I get something equivalent to a Girl Scout cookie order form each year. And I go down the list and I check, no, we don't want any hotels. We don't want any nice restaurants. Oh, yes, give us 3 check cashing places, 2 car washes, 18 convenience stores. And we don't care about any good tech jobs. But the reality is your community attracts investment, and our zoning can tell you what kind of business or home is allowed somewhere, but it cannot say, oh, no, you can't put chicken there, you must put burgers there. And you can't put, check cashing, you must put a bank. And
right.
It's those kinds of things.
Right.
And I shouldn't pick on those sectors. I mean, I really should be picking on the vape shops. That kind of thing.
Right. I see your point there too, but it's a reality, and we see it. And so I think you've kind of opened the door to an important topic that I think we need to cover around zoning and around what is allowed to be built, because one of the things I think you and I hear a lot from our neighbors in Gallatin is, enough with the apartments. Enough with the apartments. So
I couldn't agree more.
Right.
I could not agree more.
I've heard you say that too. So help listeners understand, what is the reality there in terms of zoning, in terms of legalities. How does Gallatin navigate all that?
Well, some of the properties that you see departments having been developed on or being developed on had zoning back from the 80s. That was a different kind of zoning than what we currently have. So they had entitlement and were thereby allowed to build. Other projects have been brought to the council, and because they brought some other compelling element as a part of their development, apartments were allowed. There are other apartments that I've seen be approved in my now 11 years in office that I was so against, and I really wish they hadn't have happened. Flip side of that is, and I think it's important for people to recognize, is that that's where our young people are living. I'm sitting here thinking about all the people that I know that live in apartments in Gallatin, and it's nieces and nephews and a stepdaughter and all of her cousins, and I send
new teachers. And
I send birthday cards to the employees of the city of Gallatin, so I see where our employees live. A lot of them don't live in Gallatin, and the ones who do live in apartments, and that's reality. Complicate that with the thought that a lot of people that have moved to our area have never done anything but lived in an apartment. So they choose an apartment because that is risk-free lifestyle to them. And then this is the most interesting piece to me, probably a smaller portion, but nonetheless, there is a portion of the population who has moved to our area from areas where they have seen their real estate values either decline or not grow at all, and their property values go through the roof. And so they're my age and they're retired, and they don't want the risk of escalating property taxes or declining property values. They probably have a pension and they know what they have coming in, and
that fixed cost.
And that keeps them free and able to stay retired for a long period of time. I also know people that have an apartment here and one in Florida. They're living both places again, but they know that they can get out of an apartment at whatever point you can end a lease. And a house is a different story. And so it's a different world than what we're used to. And then the density is the other thing that people are so upset about. But when I think about how do we make things make sense for the long term, density is the only solution I can see. There is no reality in which you're building a $250,000 home on an acre of land. The only way you're going to keep that affordability there, and not just affordability for the buyer, affordability for the government, because when you spread houses over larger land mass, that means more pipes in the ground, more electric lines, more sewer lines, more pavement, definitely more pavement. And then, long term, as the world continues to grow, to me, you preserve land and you keep sprawl down by doing these concentrated developments. When somebody brings in 100 acres of property and they want to build on 50 acres, that is better to me than building on all 100 acres, whatever,
Right, spreading out those lot sizes.
Whatever they need for their, preservation, for green space and drainage and stormwater, all the things they have to provide for. Because otherwise what happens, and I see this every day on 31 and 25, lots of little neighborhoods going in all over the county. And the more people sprawl out from a destination area, that's more traffic on the road every step of the way. And so when you're densely concentrated and you're hitting a major thoroughfare and moving through really quickly, it's way different than someone coming from north of Gallatin having to go all the way down 31 to get to 386 to be, that just, it exponentially increases the number of cars on the road. And if you continue that sprawl further and further and further out, it becomes a large expense for your county, but also, the traffic is so difficult to manage. And again, people have property rights and I get that, but I think that we need to understand why the density works and will work for us over the long term. Maybe not perfectly. As I probably said in my State of the City, there's not a perfect formula. Right. Gosh, I wish there were. One of the most challenging unknowns to me is that when someone gets an approval, we don't know when it's coming online or if it's coming online. I have seen it happen where an apartment or anything that was approved 6 years ago, we don't know. We don't know.
Just finally bubbles up.
We don't know their capital situation. We don't know their market analysis. They have their approval. Some will go away. Some won't break ground for 6 years, and some will break ground tomorrow. And so trying to balance that is, there is no perfect way to balance. A lot of people bring up the school system too. And I think it's interesting. And I think you said you're having Dr. Langford, or you have?
Yeah, Dr. Langford's
so
been
it's interesting when you look back historically at the growth in schools over the last 25 years, because it is incremental. It's 1% to 2% a year and has actually slowed in recent years versus grown. A lot of things play into that. People having children older, people having fewer children, people homeschooling their children, the private schools that, offer education in our area. All those things certainly affect that. Gallatin High School absolutely is full, but there are other schools that students could be zoned to that are not full and are not projected to be full for a very, very long time. The opening of Liberty Creek projected that we wouldn't need another school for 15 years. Now it's looking like that's further out, I think. Students will have to be, moved around based on where the population is. And Gallatin is kind of different than the rest, I wouldn't say from the rest of the county, but to be a large community that we are, we are probably somewhat different than Hendersonville. For one, we're more of an independent community. We do have the investment in jobs and industry. But our population's different too. We're a very diverse population, and that's in every way you can imagine, whether we're talking faith, economics, race, ethnicity. All of the diversity creates a different scenario than one where where everyone kind of makes the same amount of money and everybody's pretty middle class. And that's not true here.
Right.
And we have some really rich people and some people who are well below the poverty level.
Yeah.
And so trying to help all those people have a place and have an opportunity to prosper. When I think about, what do I want? Is it Gallatin the land? No, it's Gallatin the people. And I think about the investment that was made or the vision back in the 40s when people like my granddad, Walter Durham, formed the Industrial Development Board because we were shifting from agriculture and we needed jobs here. And the vision that they had so that people could make a living when their farming was going away almost 100 years ago. And they started bringing factory jobs here. Well, as time went by, we saw an opportunity, but also a need for elevated schools. So our thanks to Sumner County Schools and Ball State and Welch College, everybody
Right.
that's worked together to elevate schools and bring and the TCATs bring more opportunities for
Right.
those seeking an education at whatever age, and then the jobs to go with that. And so it was when I first came in office, I can remember having the conversation with our then economic development director. We are not working to attract any more $12 an hour jobs. Now, $12 an hour now sounds absolutely absurd, but
Yeah.
we're looking for six-figure jobs, not necessarily six-figure jobs based on a college degree, but six-figure jobs based on skills and
Right.
knowledge and a lot of technical expertise. And there's so many wonderful programs that are when I was starting with saying, it's not about the land, it's about the opportunity for the people who call Gallatin home and being and letting the people who are from Gallatin and love Gallatin continue to live here.
Yeah.
And that is the stress that is so broad because as people keep coming here, they're outbidding, they're buying the existing inventory. And
Can't control that.
not just first-time home buyers, but older people who are trying to downsize or, say a couple is getting divorced. They both want to remain in the community, but economically they cannot because the housing prices are so elevated. And so and I'm not saying because I've been here my family's been here for generations, I'm anything special. I mean, I think the newcomers to the area bring so much knowledge and experience and ideas that we've never seen or thought of. And so I value what the newcomers bring, but at the same time, I want the people who do have a foundation here to be able to raise their own kids here.
Right. And that's part of preserving what is special about this community. Mm-hmm. There's so many things I could pick up on from what you just mentioned. Let's talk a little bit about the square in Gallatin, because I've lived here almost 14 years, and I've seen a notable shift in the square, and it's surviving. It's filling in. There's not many empty locations along that corridor, but it still maybe isn't thriving as much as I would like to see. There's not quite as much foot traffic and activity. So where it's come from and where it is now, and where you hope it can go in the future. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think like most older downtowns, the Gallatin Square. Certainly before I was born, and even maybe in the 70s when I was a child, maybe even into the early 80s, the square was where you did a lot of your shopping and your running and your visiting. And you had the post office was downtown, and there was a Fred's downtown, and several clothing stores, and 2 jewelry stores, and a bookstore, and a bakery. All the things that were central to doing your business before strip malls, before big box stores. Before the population grew, right? But like all of the old core business district communities in growing areas, it kind of lost its relevance, honestly lost its appeal. I'm just so thankful that people cared enough about those buildings and the history of our square to not let it be leveled, because there are other cities that have taken down whole sides of their square or...
You're kidding.
Well, it's not unlike the historic homes in Gallatin that were bulldozed for something new and spectacular. When it's only 50 years old, you don't value it like you do when it's 100 years old or when it's 150. And so I'm very, very grateful that the square still stood. And then, I helped with a lunch counter at one point when I was young. And the attorneys came and bought sandwiches, but it still didn't. Nothing really thrived in a way that people were making a good living with their business. There was one restaurant here that was here for a lot of years, La Riviera's on the corner. They ultimately had to shut. Gavan's, was here probably the longest of anyone, and they've closed. But at this point, there's been a lot of businesses that have survived, and some that say they do well for over a decade at this point. And I think that two things happened. One, my predecessor, Joanne Graves, and the council at that time, and it was some kind of funds from the feds that helped the project. They did a downtown streetscape that made the square much more aesthetically pleasing. It was very painful. A lot of businesses did close as a result of it. But ultimately, I think the aesthetic that is historic downtown Gallatin is much more appealing. At the same time, there was this, I don't know, I think yearning by society to have the value of experiences, to know their neighbors, to get engaged in their community. And I have watched, over the last decade, young people come to downtown and just embrace it and love it and invest in it and care about it and want to make it better. I am confident that the square will continue to survive, and I think several businesses will continue to thrive. But I have long held steadfast that increased residences surrounding the historic square are key to better prosperity, longer-term sustainability, and ultimately the success of the people that choose to spend their money and invest in their dreams in downtown Gallatin. Yeah. And so I have had many, many conversations over the years about redeveloping peripheral property, and I'm not telling you where to go, but there are opportunities for redevelopment where we don't lose historic buildings. Certainly don't lose any of the square. Never would want to touch that core square. And develop some housing, because when you live in the area that is your daily market, the place that you go to get coffee, the place that you go to pick up dinner, get snacks, and you can walk all those places and enjoy your neighbors at the corner pub or bar, I guess you call it here, right? It is a different way of life, but it also translates into better business
prosperity
success
for those businesses. Mm-hmm. So I just want to kind of summarize. I have seen a lot of growth in the square in the time that we have lived here, and I feel like you are really on the precipice of considering some really bold but strategic moves for the future. And that's not to be taken lightly or criticized without really peeling the onion and looking at where we've come from, where we are, and where we're headed. There's a lot to balance there, and like all these things, there's a lot of pros and cons and a lot of challenges. It's not just as simple as we'd like it to be. So I'm grateful to see it thrive. And, personally, I'll kind of touch on what I already said earlier. Maybe living, without a yard is a great thing, and living without a yard with a thriving downtown would be the best of everything in my personal view of my future self.
There's a lot of people that would like to live downtown, and the coolest things, the biggest impacts, they are really hard to get done. And it's real easy to listen to the naysayers and just put stuff to bed because it's going to be too difficult to navigate. But that doesn't help long term. It doesn't transform. It doesn't bring possibility and prosperity. It is just maintaining the status quo until someone does have the guts. I hear so often, and I have had this conversation so frequently, you need to listen to the residents, to the citizens. Well, which ones? I mean, typically we'll hear from probably the most we've ever heard from is 100 people out of 52,000. Right. And the reality is that no one ever wants something built next to them.
Right.
So not to say that those voices don't matter when it's their immediate vicinity, but you have to balance that with the whys and what is good for Gallatin long term, and what opportunity does it bring long term for all of Gallatin. And there's been a couple of developments that I've really watched evolve when I can remember the people being so angry about that being built there. And then they were angry because we didn't have them connected to it because they complained and didn't want that connection. But then they realized the advantage of it. I've seen property values greatly improved by nearby investment. I have seen communities, friends, neighbors created through investment and from those evil, greedy developers, because I did say that in my State of the City, because it's so interesting to me, because I can remember 15 years ago sitting in a room, a big table with a bunch of people in the community that cared about Gallatin, saying, how can we get somebody to invest in Gallatin? And so those developers and those people that sold their land, they were our heroes, because they were helping bring valuable investment to our community. Because without that, do you know what this would look like here? Our property taxes would be through the roof, our property values would be nil, and our children would not be wanting to stay in this area. That's the reality. I grew up with that.
Yeah,
I grew up with that. And people talk about, the growth is going to cause our property taxes to go up. You look across the state of Tennessee, the highest taxes are always in the areas where they have well, I should take the major cities out of it: Knoxville, Chattanooga, Memphis, maybe, and Nashville. But they're different kinds of cities, and they offer different kinds of services. A city our size never will. So it becomes a different kind of burden. But you look at small, medium cities, and the ones that have the escalating taxes are the ones that are losing appeal, and the ones that don't have the industrial investment or the retail
and the commercial
to offset that.
Right. There is.
I talk a lot. I'm sorry. I'm a little passionate. I just love it.
You are passionate, and you are helping build the next extraordinary chapter of this great city. So we thank you for that, and we will come back and have another visit with you in the future.
I'd love it.
Thank you for today.
Thank you, Deanne.